Let's speak now to international relations expert and former Ambassador Dr. Kingsley Makhubela on this particular story. Thank you so much for joining us, Doc. Good evening to you. Now, before we get into the discussion around the what happened in the Eastern Cape, we've just received news now that Judge Bernard Ngwebe is going to be chairing the board of inquiry that's going to be looking at the participation of Iran in the naval drills. You and I have had this conversation before. Your reaction?
You know, thanks very much, Bongiwe. When the minister issued out a public statement about the Board of Inquiry, she said at that time, with effective from the day that she issued out the statement, it would take 7 days. 7 days has gone past now. So we're seeing a total different process now to conduct this inquiry.
And do you think it's going to get to the bottom of some of the concerns you were raising?
You know, Bongiwe, the concerns that one raised, they still persist. And I think the president's comment actually has further really created a confusion around this, because the president speaks about the fact China was the leading country. He says we need to look into how we're going to deal with this in future. If we are hosting, what are the terms of reference and responsibility we have? It's no longer the narrative of a military general who defied the president. And of course, the narrative that is being punted that the military defied the president. So it's a total different inquiry. I'm yet to see the terms of reference, and I hope the government will be quite open to publish these terms of reference so that we all understand what is being investigated.
Yeah. And back to the subject matter at hand, right? The Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane is saying that the meeting between Israel as well as the AbaThembu King was a breach of diplomatic protocols, going further, calling it an attempt by the Israeli government to undermine the sovereign right of South Africa to manage its internal affairs. Is it?
You know, Bongiwe, there are two approaches in terms of this issue. The Premier himself is out of 10. Foreign affairs is not a concurrent function. It's the sole responsibility of the national government. And we've seen over the past local government, even cities, trying to come up with some diplomatic activities. But the constitution is quite clear. There's no concurrent function in terms of this. This is supposed to be the statement issued out by the national government, not the Premier. The Premier should stay out of that. Having said that, Bongiwe, the Article 41 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations that speaks about the responsibility of the sending state to the receiving state, it spells this quite clearly. The receiving state or the sending state should interact with the receiving state through the Minister of Foreign Affairs or any other entity designated by the government. I don't know if, in this case, Israeli diplomatic missions were given permission to interact directly with the provincial government. If they were given that permission, it's a total different matter. But the Vienna Convention spells out these things quite clearly. The diplomatic mission also, in terms of Article 41 of the Vienna Convention, has the responsibility to respect the laws and regulations of the receiving countries. Actually, some countries, they go at length, Bongiwe, to teach their diplomat how to respect the laws and regulation of the receiving state. The British actually do this very well. They train their people. We used to train our people, I don't know if it's still going on, about how to respect the rules and laws of the receiving country. So the Israeli mission in terms of this, they should have known that this is the function of the national government. So they shouldn't have communicated directly with any entity outside the knowledge of the national government.
So when you listen to some of the voices that are speaking in reaction to some of what we've seen happen, right, the cooperation, the donations, etc., some are saying that for them this is a good move because it's going to help with the hospitals. We know what the Premier's office has had to say. But who negotiates these kinds of cooperation?
You know, any money that comes into the country for assistance to any government, it goes through the National Treasury. I know I have been involved when I was at DECO to negotiate some money or to fundraise with some government for the Sudan project. But once that commitment was made, the money is channeled through the National Treasury. And the National Treasury can actually decide to incorporate this into the fiscals, unless you negotiate that within the National Treasury, that should be set aside for a specific project, which the National Treasury would do. But in this instance, for the Israeli government to even go to hospitals and start to think about a developmental project in the Eastern Cape, it's actually outside the norms of diplomacy. If you look at the functions, there are 5 functions in diplomatic missions. They are contained in Article 3 of the Vienna Convention. There are 5 of them. One of them is to negotiate with the receiving state. And that negotiation must be done through the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in this case, our DECO. That's where the negotiation should take place, not with any other entity, because that violates the Diplomatic Immunities and Privileges Act that really governs the behavior and conduct of diplomats.
So when you look at the Vienna Convention, it also speaks about the embassies not supposed to interfere with internal affairs of the country. Would this constitute such?
Bongiwe, I think you are a serious diplomat par excellence. It's quite correct. It's also in Article 41 that the receiving state, the negotiation, must be done with the government of the receiving state. And in this case, it's DECO. Anything that operates outside the permission of DECO would constitute what it's called operating outside their mandate, and it may constitute serious act. In certain instances, if you go back to history, there are actions that have been taken for such behavior against diplomats who really go outside to communicate. Similarly, any organ of the state that communicates with the Israeli embassy, the Israeli embassy have a responsibility, it's contained in Article 41, to tell them to do that through DECO, not even to accept it. To say, we will do this, but you have to go through DECO. It's contained in there.
So, 2 questions in one. How does South Africa begin to deal with this, and what message does it send to the world if then we have such a situation?
One thing that we must be very careful of as a country, once you start getting diplomatic missions channeling resources through their preferred local government or provincial government, it will create a huge problem. That's why you have a caveat that control the entry point. That's one. The next thing, Bongiwe, you can't have every entity going after and negotiating this outside the knowledge of the national government. So that is null and void. South Africa has the responsibility. I hope South Africa has called the Israeli diplomats to speak to them quietly about this. And maybe we don't know, they've spoken to them, this is out of 10. But I'm saying the Israeli government or the Israeli embassy in this case, they have the responsibility to tell King Dalindyebo to say, we can't do this unless you come up with a letter from DECO that really gives us permission to directly interface with you.
So I suppose the next line of questioning then goes to the Department of International Relations. So thank you so much for talking to us. Let's see what answers do we get in that particular front, and if in fact they have engaged with the Israeli government. Appreciate your time as always. That's Dr. Kingsley Makhubela, the international relations expert as well as former ambassador.